on. One last announcement I failed to make, and our class wanted to change our Sunday school lesson. And Rodney, I talked with Sharon about this a minute ago, and I talked to the ladies' class. Our Sunday school lessons don't match the calendar. And so we're always wondering which lesson we're on. If you miss a lesson or if we have a special event or something, what we're going to do. And so we're proposing that we, Rodney, next Sunday we jump ahead to the lesson January 7th, which is actually the 6th lesson. So you don't skip 5 lessons. So I've assigned our class, you have to do your homework. So you got homework. So you read the 5 lessons and you have the whole quarter to do that. But we're in the book of Judges, and so, just pick one. They got away from God and they went down. They got a judge and God blessed them and they went up. So there you got the book of Judges. Just put a name to it. But everybody following me, we'll get with the calendar. And so next Sunday will be January 7th. And so it's right on in your book. It's dated right at the top of your first page. It'll give you the date. And then if we ever have a special Easter service or something, we'll just skip that lesson. You'll just have to catch it up, on your own, or the teacher can go over 2 lessons that week or whatever. But we'll stay with the calendar. That way when we order, it'll be easy for all of us to stay on the same page, so to speak. Okay? Everybody with me? We'll try that and see if that is a little easier for everybody. Especially most of our classes have more than one teacher, and so if you're out, it's just some issues there. I've decided to follow Jesus. That's a pretty good thought this morning, isn't it? And then I'd rather have Jesus. The 2 songs that we have this morning go right in with the title of the message. It is going to be a relative straightforward, maybe a little more simpler kind of message. Next Sunday we will go back to Romans, so get ready. We've got to finish up Romans. As I've told you before, I believe the greatest book ever written, not just the Bible, but any book Paul's writing to the Roman people. But this morning we're going to be in the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 4. It will be on the slides, but if you want to read along, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, as I've entitled the message, What Are You Living For? So we are entering a new year. What are you living for? We could say, what are you focused on? I know some of you played basketball growing up, and probably about all of us have played basketball at some point in time, PE or a buddy's house or whatever, and we call that little orange thing a what? What is that little orange thing that's pretty prominent when we're playing basketball? The goal, the rim, the hoop, the whatever. I've always called it a goal. And, of course, we use that term to talk about a lot of things in life. What is our goal? Connie, were you forward or guard? Forward. So you towed the free throw line. And once you towed that free throw line and referee pitched you the ball, what were you focused on? You were focused on the goal, wasn't you? And you watch basketball players. I mean, they may be dribbling it, but they're not looking around off over. You probably was worried about Jeff and what he was doing and what he was thinking. No, when you toe up to that line, if you're a good basketball player, you are focused on that goal. You want to put the ball through the goal. And to be a good basketball player takes a lot of skill, a lot of discipline, line drills, and we ran bleachers up and down the bleachers, wondered if we didn't break legs, but I don't remember ever having anybody break a leg. But we'd run the bleachers, line drills, laps, all kind of different exercises, and get out there and play and play and play and play. Well, all that was important. The bottom line, the goal was to see that little ball go through that goal. And if that didn't go through that goal more times than your opponent did, then you lost. And so you focused on that basketball goal. What are you focusing on in your life? What's the focus of your life? All the activities that we do has to culminate in something. What's the win? And Paul's going to tell us right here in this passage, and I hope that it'll be the win for you as we look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16. Therefore, we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, and yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look or we do not focus at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So let's look at what our brother, under the inspiration of the Lord, has written to us as we break that down. Therefore, and of course, therefore is always there for a reason. He's been talking about something that he's going to go ahead and talk some more about. And he says, therefore, we do not lose heart. Now, that's a biggie in itself, because as this whole passage is dealing with the temporary, the seen versus the unseen, when we get our eyes on the wrong thing, we can lose heart, can't we? We can be discouraged. We can be frightened. We can let the circumstance, we can let the bad news, when we dwell on the external, when we dwell on the temporary, the momentary, as Paul says here, we can easily lose heart. We can be overwhelmed. I don't know, was your lesson today on Jesus calming the storm? Sharon, was that where y'all were at, or did y'all? The seed, so y'all don't have to skip over a very important lesson. Or maybe, Miss Nancy, you'll just wrap them all up. Maybe you can teach like 7 lessons next week and be here to, walk across for first kids, because you'll be here till 4 o'clock, won't you? But the last lesson in chapter 4 of Mark that we kind of ran over today, we didn't get to spend a lot of time on it, is Jesus calming the storm, just saying, peace, be still. And the wind and the waves heard and responded to Jesus. And here the disciples were in great fear, because Jesus said, why are ye so fearful? Where's your faith at? And church, that's exactly what is still present in our life today. If we're looking at the external, if we're looking at the temporary, if we're looking at the momentary, we can be afraid. We can be living in fear, because we do have the storms. We do have the waves. And if we're looking at that, we can be greatly afraid. But it says, even though our outward man is perishing, man, we can identify with that, can't we? Mr. Don, we can identify with that, can't we? This old body is not what it used to be. And I'm not near old as Mr. Don, but I'm old enough. This body's not what it used to be. Tammy, this body's not what it used to be, is it? Tammy was telling me this week about having a lawn mowing business. Aren't you glad you're not having to do that for a living anymore, because our bodies, this external, our outward man is perishing. I may have told you the other day, I made a bunch of phone calls, and everybody I talked to, from Miss Jackie to Pat Ward to Miss Mary Dennis and different ones, and man, is our bodies perishing. This outward man is perishing. Yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. Now, he's not talking about the fact that our inner personality or our emotions or our psyche or man, we're up all the time. No, the fact that he was just talking about something that he brought about this therefore, and we back up, Kelly, next slide actually backs us up to verse 14. The next slide. And so verse 14 is where Paul gets this therefore that he's just talking about. Therefore, because of this, because we know something, we know that he who raised up the Lord Jesus will also raise us up with Jesus and will present us with you. That's something pretty important to know. And that's why when he says this inner man, he's not talking about how good we're feeling about life. He's talking about our soul, our eternal soul that's either going to heaven or hell. And while the external man, we're in this world. We're living life. We're growing old. We have our aches and pains. And it's not that every ache and pain is drawing us closer to God. We don't go out and do something to, we don't go out and sin and get drunk and have a car wreck just so we'll have aches and pains so we can praise God that the inner. Now that's totally not what he's talking about. But he is talking about as we are growing older and we having all of our aches and pains, it brings us as Christians, it brings us closer to God. It helps Miss Maria give a testimony of how good God is in our lives, and that's what he's dealing with. But it's because of this, knowing that Jesus Christ one day is going to raise us from the dead. So therefore, we don't lose heart because we know something. Even though the outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. And look at verse 17. For our light affliction. Now, the Apostle Paul really didn't know what light affliction was, but yet he was able to call it that. A man that was beaten 39 times, given 39 stripes 3 different times. History tells us that many men didn't survive the first beating of 39 stripes. He had to have been a man that was so scarred up that his back and perhaps stomach, because they say the cat of 9 tails many times would wrap around them, not just hitting them on the back, and then shipwrecked and snake bit and all the trials that the Apostle Paul went through, and yet he calls them light afflictions. For our light afflictions, which is but for a moment. One translator said it this way, or one commentary put it this way, just a moment. Or like we'd say, just a minute, just a moment. It's here and it's gone. Our light affliction, which is but for a moment. And whatever our affliction is, it may not seem light at the time, but Paul's trying to get our attention. But our light affliction, that's just for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. And James tells us that we know that our life is just a vapor that appears for a time and then it's gone. Our whole life is just but for a moment and then it's gone. So Paul is wanting to get our attention to help us not to focus on the momentary, on the temporary. And then look how the ESV, I want to put this verse in here. I wanted you to see this same verse. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Back up, Kelly, 2 slides. I want to show that 4:17 again. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding. Now, almost all the translations, except the NIV, translated far more exceeding that way. But in the original language, far more and exceeding is the same exact word. He puts the same word twice. It's actually in the Greek manuscript. You see the same word, Greek word, listed twice. All the translators did the best they could to show how important that was. It's far more exceeding. Now go forward to the ESV. For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory far more exceeding, but they say beyond all comparison. That's what he really wants us to get. And I want you to see something there. The lightness versus the weight of glory. The lightness of the affliction versus the weight of the glory. The fact that it's momentary affliction versus the eternal weight of glory. And the fact that indeed it is affliction versus glory. So that's a powerful verse of Scripture Paul's wanting you to dwell on. For this light, nothingness, momentary affliction. Now, I've used the scales and other illustrations before, the balances where you have the two round platforms usually, and whatever's the weightier goes down, the lighter goes up. And this picture came to my mind. When you and I are looking at the things of this world, when we're looking at the temporary afflictions of this world, we indeed allow that to weight us down. Right? You following me? When we're focused on the problem, it becomes heavy to bear. But Paul is saying here that when God comes on the scene, it's like bringing a big brick and just crushing the other side. And the weight of the glory so far surpasses the lightness of the affliction that it's beyond all comparison. You get that picture? And it's all a matter of focus on what you're looking at. Are you looking at the momentary that's going to just, even our whole life is as a fleeting vapor, boom, it's here and then it's gone? Or are we looking at the eternal, that which is going to be with us forever? The fact that one day we're going to be in heaven forever, not even bound by time. We don't know what eternal means. It's just forever. And the weight of the glory of God. There's a lot said in the Bible about the glory of God. And we don't know all that the glory of God's going to be for us in heaven. We don't live and dwell and be in the glory of God. And so what are you focused on? And if you're focused, and it's not that we can't be concerned, and we're not supposed to worry, be anxious for nothing, but pray about everything. But that is one hard verse to live, isn't it? Because, man, we can get anxious at the drop of a hat and worry about things. But Paul is saying, I want you to remember something. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the power that's going to raise you from the dead. And this affliction you're in now, and man, it may be weighting us down. And it will if we're concentrating on it. And Paul knew about that. And Paul is the one writing this out of great affliction. But he calls it a light affliction. And it's just for a moment. But it's preparing something in us. So church, there's a reason for it all. We're still in this world. And our heartaches are to drive us to Christ. They can do, and it's, I know, a cliche, make us better or make us better. But indeed it does. Because the lost world will shake its fist at God and say, see, I told you there's no God. And if there is a God, then the agnostics of the world say, well, he don't care about us. So the atheist would just say there is no God, and the agnostic would say, well, there is a God, but he don't care about your little problems. You're on your own. And Paul would refute both of those. There is a God, and he's a good God. And he's an all-powerful God that can raise even the dead. And he's preparing something in you. He's preparing an eternal, crushing weight of glory that crushes any affliction this old world can bring about. If indeed we're looking to him. It's beyond all comparison, he says, verse 18. If indeed we're living this out. If indeed while we're not looking at the things which are seen. And that's the key, and that's the big one. Because just like the parable of the sower, we looked at that in Sunday school too this morning, Mark chapter 4. It's easy for the cares of this world, just living a life. We are still in this world, and this world is still bombarding us with all kinds of sickness and pain and suffering and affliction. But what are we going to focus on? We're going to focus on that and let that weigh us down. Let that be so heavy a load that we can't bear it. Or are we going to look at what Christ can bring with his great glory? While we do not look at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. Because or for the things which are seen are what? What does it say? They're what? They're what? You can read it. Can you believe it? They're temporary. But the things which are not seen are what? They're eternal. And you know what? That's always been our problem and always will be our problem as long as we're in these bodies. When Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, 400 years of bondage, and how I've labeled that second greatest story ever told because it mirrors the greatest story ever told, and how that the children of Israel were living in captivity to a power that they were unable to do anything about, and how that you and I, living in this world, living in sin, with a power over us, the sin nature that we are, that we have, that we're powerless to do anything about it. And Christ has to redeem us, has to lead us out, just like Moses had to physically lead the children of Israel out. So there's great beauty in the story and how it relates to what Christ did later. And do you know that by the end of 30 days, by the end of the first month is when they started murmuring? You brought us out here in the wilderness and there's no water and there's no food. So what were they focused on? The eternal or the temporary? Don't have anything to eat. Don't have anything to drink. At least back in captivity under Egypt, we had food to eat. I wish you'd have just left us alone and carried us back or left us there. 400 years of this. And within a month, they're wishing they just went back because the weight of the temporary was so great, and that was their entire focus. Until Moses cries out to God, and God says, I'm going to send them a food that'll just appear on the ground, and they'll just go out and pick it up. And I want you to go speak to the rock or go strike the rock. And when you strike the rock, and that's a picture of Christ being struck on the cross, when you strike the rock, in the sense life-giving water, everlasting water in the sense that they would have died without it, is going to come from the rock in the middle of the wilderness. And so out here in the middle of nowhere, with no hope left, focused on their affliction, the temporary had them so weighted down that they couldn't see what God was doing. And God intervened with food and water, but then he told them something. He said, I just want you to pick up enough for today. And guys, what a lesson that is for us today. That God's going to give us what we need today. He's going to bless us for the day. I don't know what 2024 is going to bring. Nobody does it? We probably will welcome some babies into the world. Our family, Granny's family, I asked two already. We know of a grandson. We already know it's a boy, and I'm not sure about that. It's a great grandson. My brother is now having. It's a great. Yeah, my brother's already having great grandchildren. So one's a great and one's a great. So we're looking forward to that. But we may be putting people in a coffin this year too, and it could be me. Could be any of us. We don't know what the year's going to bring. But the picture of manna, because it's such a great picture of what Christ did and of the Christian life, of just following as God leads. And he said if you gather too much, it's going to have worms in it and rot. And that's exactly what happened. Some folks got greedy. Well, I can pick up enough for 2 days and lay in and sleep late tomorrow. I'll have enough food. And what they picked up that they didn't eat in that one day rotted. Except on the Sabbath, and God said on the 6th day, pick up enough for 2 days, because I'm not going to send you any tomorrow. So the folks that got used to it and said, well, we'll just pick up some on Sunday. No, the grocery store was closed on Sunday. They went hungry if they didn't pick up some on Saturday, or Friday and Saturday. Back then it was the Sabbath. God sent them just what they needed for that day. And I believe that's the picture of what God is still doing for us today. Just to trust him, knowing that we're going to have afflictions, knowing that we're going to have trials and troubles in our life, but knowing that God's great enough that if we'll focus on him, he's going to see us through. It's also in the book of Mark, where Jesus himself said, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Because the whole world is temporary. The whole world is momentary. The whole world's going to pass away. And as Jesus said, that which we lay up in heaven, where moth and rust that which is on earth, moth and rust is going to destroy or or thieves will break through and steal, but lay up our treasures in heaven because it's eternal. And that's one day where we're going to be. So what's our focus? And 2024 shouldn't be tomorrow's no different to today in that. What's our focus? How are we going to live our lives to serve the Lord Jesus Christ? Let's bow for prayer.